Good afternoon. A certain number of mirror effects between speakers on such a specific topic are perhaps inevitable, and we've seen a few already, perhaps. There is one, however, whose innocence will strike you as unlikely, but I assure you it was not pre-planned, and this comes from someone rather prone to conspiracy theories. I'm sure you'll see it for yourself. I won't give you a preview. And hopefully the very mirror effect itself will spark discussion. So I get to my talk. History is notoriously difficult to define. Uniquely among modern fields of knowledge, its very name refers to both a discipline and its object of analysis. History can be both past reality itself, as well as its representation. From this ambiguous homonymy emerges much of the difficulty in determining what history, the discipline, actually is. For what most modern historians claim to be doing is simply letting reality speak for itself through their narratives. From the early 19th century onwards, the historian was seen to be simply a vessel, which, grounded in the appropriate source criticism, would achieve a certain neutrality and allow history to reveal itself. The name of this discourse is historicism, and its modus operandi is the principle of cause and effect. The grand organizing pillar of historicism, then, is the progressive passing of time, along which to place particular moments of significance. To use Marxist parlance, historicism is anchored in the fetishization of the concepts of time and space. What are fundamentally variable and unstable products of social, political, ideological processes appear as fixed, natural, and objective. I was asked to participate in this panel today specifically as a historian. That is, to provide a historical perspective and context for the momentous events of recent months. The diktats of historicism would require of me to present the conditions, economic, social, demographic, political, etc., that have led to the revolutionary situation in the Arab world today. I seek to do no such thing. Experts more knowledgeable than I have already provided elements to this end. Besides, part of what I would like to submit to you is that such an analysis would in fact constrain the very creative potentialities sparked by the revolution. Instead, I should like to present three possible theatrical scenarios, three narrative plots by which to read this special moment. I derive my inspiration quite fittingly from the little and in fact rather mediocre essay signed by Jamal Abdel Nasser and entitled The Philosophy of the Revolution. I say mediocre because it reads as awfully outdated and quite simplistic. What Nasser does sense quite brilliantly, however, is the idea that space is not a unitary stable concept that can be divided into so many impermeable subjects of history. Egypt's revolution, he famously argues, the previous one, is to be inscribed within three partially overlapping but distinct spatial circles: the Arab world, Africa, and Islam. We should not be hypnotized, he warns, by conventional political notions of space. And I quote, "If anybody tells me that place for us means this capital where we live, I differ from him. And if anyone tells me that place for us means the political boundaries of our country, I also differ." End quote. No, space is multiple and variant. And this diversity of planes will inevitably affect the fate of the revolution. A nation's identity, he seems to be saying, is fundamentally plural, and that is a strength, not a weakness. The same critical approach is not extended to the concept of time, however. Time is absolute and unitary. It's one time for all, and it completely determines all of the past, present, and future. Its trajectory is fixed, and indeed it has already been traced by Europe, of course. It even has a name, progress, and a preset goal, modernity. All that remains to be done is simply to follow in the footsteps, to produce the appropriate objective conditions for the proverbial cause to have the desired effect. I would like to pursue Nasser's spatial insight into the realm of time and present to you 3 circles of temporality. There you get it. Within which the current revolutions are inscribed. Remember, however, these are not to be understood as antecedents or causes, in the language that is of objective realism or historicism, but rather as plots or scenarios, more in the realm of the imagination and of writing. I may in fact here too find inspiration in Nasser's text itself, which closes with the following words, and now I go back to that wandering mission in search of a hero to play it. Here is the role, here are the lines, and here is the stage. We alone, by virtue of our place, can perform the role. The first circle that I paint is the very short term, about, say, the last 25 years. It involves a roller coaster saga of what one commentator suggests we see as one long Palestinian uprising, marked by the 2 intifadas, of course, but also by explosive elections and continuous resistance, both inside and out. The coherence of this scenario is easy to sense. The Palestinian struggle has galvanized activists' attention on a global scale, and especially in the Arab world, and shown from the outset in December 1987 how an unarmed people can suddenly divest itself of fear. Some commentators identify the precedents of the recent massive demonstrations in Egypt as lying in the demonstrations in solidarity with the Palestinians during the savage Israeli suppression of the Al-Aqsa Intifada. Solidarity with the Palestinian struggle has been one of the most dynamic channels of activism in numerous places, most importantly in the Arab world. Moreover, the aesthetics of the demonstrations in Tunis and Egypt, at least at the beginning, but also more globally in Argentina, Greece, Genoa, and even France in 2005, for example, clearly conform to the aesthetics and ethos associated with the Palestinian intifadas. Of course, this is not to say that any people own this or that aesthetics, but simply to point towards structural resemblances. In addition, the persistence of the Palestinian question forms an integral and crucial part of the concerns of the participants in the Arab revolutions. Important as well in this regard, and of course not disconnected to the long Palestinian uprising, is the retreat of the Israeli army from South Lebanon in 2000 and its defeat in the renewed invasion of July 2006. This sounded the final death knell of the enduring double myth of Israeli might and invincibility opposed to Arab meekness and passivity. Finally, the explicitly dual object of attack on the part of the Palestinian uprising, that is, against both external occupation and interference, and against internal nepotism, corruption, authoritarianism, incompetence, will be followed in similar pattern in today's Arab revolutions. The second circle envelops approximately the past century and concerns primarily the formulated struggle against European colonialism, ranging from the numerous uprisings immediately following the First World War, notably in Egypt, in fact, to the destruction of apartheid in South Africa and the already raging Palestinian struggle. The contours of this circle are too numerous for me to describe them, but it is worthy to point out that Jamal Abdel Nasser plays an important role on this stage, both locally, regionally, and globally. This was the age of Che Guevara, of Fanon and Cabral, of the Bandung Conference and the Tricontinental Conference, of the Algerian and Vietnamese wars with their millions of martyrs. It is also the age of May '68 in Paris and of the Black Panthers in the US. The characteristic of this age is the accession of the colonized and the marginalized to a platform previously reserved for white elite Europeans. Politically speaking, of course, but also discursively speaking. The colonized were no longer seeking a permission to narrate from colonial masters. They were just speaking, loud and clear. This shattered the fundamental racism that lay at the very root of the colonial era. But it effected it by espousing much of the discourse of colonial Europe, its language, its concepts, assumptions, and implications, grounded, of course, in the master narrative of progress and modernity. The third circle is the longest, running back to the consolidation of industrial capitalism and colonialism, and the consequences of and resistances to their brutal expansion. This circle brings center stage 1848, the Printemps des Peuples, those revolutions that ran riot in much of Europe. This circle is, of course, the age of revolutions par excellence, as Eric Hobsbawm's famous title affirms. It is the time of the Communist Manifesto. It is the spring of the people, the moment of rise of the idea of universal rights of man, at first political mainly, self-determination, right to vote, etc., but also social and economic. It is also the era of the nascent socialist and communist movements, inspired increasingly by the writings of Marx, whose influence will go ever increasing and ever expanding, until recently at least, although even then it is quite arguable. This age is also the moment of the heroic resistance against modern colonization and racism, from the Haitian Revolution of 1804 to the Urabi Revolt of 1882 and beyond. It is the age of the heroic resistance of the Emir Abdel Qadir to the French invasion of Algeria, finally suppressed by the massacre of perhaps 1/3 of the existing population. It is the age of the Great Rebellion of 1857 that shook British authority in India to its very core. It too was repressed with enormous loss of life. The particularity of these various movements is that they emerged before the complete hegemony of colonial capitalist Europe over discourse, and may therefore provide interesting avenues for fresh formulations outside of the dictates of modern times. Thus must I close my last circle, only with great reluctance. The exercise has proved fruitful to me, despite early misgivings. I hope it has provided some food for thought to you too. And now, no doubt, you have reached the so what question. The answer is quite counterintuitively simple. And it goes something like this. For too long, we have depended on concepts and theories to guide the march of our varied histories. And inevitably, these concepts and theories have tended to be European in content and form. Amilcar Cabral, the greatest anti-colonial fighter of our second circle, summed up perhaps best this long-held and quite sensible refrain. Open quote. You've heard it once already. Sing it loud with me. If it is true that a revolution can fail, even though it be based on perfectly conceived theories, nobody has yet made a successful revolution without a revolutionary theory. If this were the case, and this has been the dominant position from the end of the 19th century to this day throughout the enlightened world, then the recent events in our region would be doomed to fail miserably. Not only do they clearly not have a revolutionary theory to accompany them, they contain barely any elements of ideology as we know it, and certainly no political party that may serve as vanguard. But what if this was not actually the case? What if this proposition that seems so reasonable turned out to be off the mark? What if, in short, revolutions needed not more theory, but rather less, or perhaps even none at all? This is, in fact, what the French philosopher Michel Foucault would suggest only a few years after Cabral in a discussion with high school students in the aftermath of May '68. In this series of fascinating exchanges, Foucault argues that to attempt to imagine another system is in fact perpetuating the participation in the current system. The need for theory and general discourse, he writes, still partakes of the very system that we seek to eliminate. By contrast, he affirms that a genuinely revolutionary undertaking is directed not only against the present, but against the until now. Une entreprise révolutionnaire est précisément dirigée non seulement contre le présent, mais contre la loi du jusqu'à présent. Revolutionary action is directed not only against the present, therefore, but also against the very idea of the precedent, against the very principle of cause and effect. There is something liberating in the idea that future events need not replicate the same pattern. That is why I'm insistent on not reading the above temporal circles as precedents or historical parallels, but simply as imaginative potential plots. It is in this way that I see the flooding of the gates of time suggested here as participating in the revolutionary moment. The deconstruction of the sovereignty of historicist time will participate in opening the space for the true expression of diversity, for the realization of the creative potentiality of the present, for the crafting of possible futures. Just like the multiplication of space circles reveals a plural identity in Nasr, so will the diversification of temporal circles. Do notice, please, that none of the storylines that I have plotted for you today contain closure, without which no historicist history is deemed proper. I have declined to propose closure. I have not delineated here any relation of cause to effect and its potential outcome. And that is why I have insisted, against the express advice of my colleagues, to call the recent events in the region a revolution. A revolution that is not because it has achieved particular ends that we experts identify or do not identify as constituting a revolution, but rather to the contrary, in the sense that this is a moment of great potentiality, precisely because of the breakdown of our special analytical criteria and concepts, precisely because it is a moment when the voiceless masses make us, experts, voiceless, forbidding us to provide a pretentious closure to our analysis. Moreover, the participants in these events in Tunis, Egypt, and beyond speak of what they are performing as a revolution. Why so easily accuse them of terminological confusion? In fact, perhaps the greatest lesson of the ongoing Arab Revolution is that we need to rethink and perhaps let go of the conventional understanding of the analytical concepts we use, such as the idea of the political revolution, in which the takeover of the machinery of the state is the be-all and end-all in the engineering of a new phase of a new society. Finally, and more simply, I use revolution also in the sense intended by the great Caribbean poet Aimé Césaire of the ongoing effort by the rising peoples of the region to really create enough room for all at the rendezvous of victory. Thank you.